I'm really excited to be introducing a podcast and a resource that has done amazing work in the criminal justice space, The Returning Citizen. We're really lucky to have the co-creators here, Jacob Smith, Imani Mixon, and Erik Burgess, and they've put together a really amazing group of people that are going to be discussing today how we can empower ex-offenders through education. We have some questions that we've taken from Googlers in advance, so we'll circle back to those at the end, but for now I'm going to kick it off over to Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for everybody tuning in. Welcome to a very special edition of The Returning Citizen. We are recording live here from the brand new Google Detroit headquarters in the Little Caesars Arena. Before we kick off, I just want to give a huge shout out to Elise Guilfoyle, the Toxic Google team, everybody at Google for all of their incredible work in bringing this to light. This started as just an idea, and here we are actually doing it. So that's pretty cool. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So I'm Jacob Smith. I'm a Detroit-based entrepreneur and social justice organizer.
And I'm Imani Mixon, a Detroit-based and embraced writer who reports on neighborhood change and creative independence. And we started The Returning Citizen back in 2017 just as an idea that you kick around with a coworker after work and with a friend that you meet through that coworker. We're not at that company anymore, but we are getting our ideas out anyway. So The Returning Citizen is a resource for returning citizens and their families, and we hope to just bring a bit of positivity to the enormous challenges that they face. And just for quick context, the U.S. has the most prisoners, which is over 2 million, and the highest per capita incarceration rate of any country on earth. So that means that about 1 in 100 Americans are incarcerated. And most of these folks will return home as our neighbors. We believe everybody wins when we help these returning citizens become successful. And if you like what you hear today, feel free to visit www.thereturningcitizen.org. We're also on SoundCloud and other podcast platforms.
Absolutely. Thank you, Imani. So just to explain what we're talking about here today. So when men and women come out of prison, it's safe to say that they face a lot of different challenges. And there's no instruction manual. You're not provided with an instruction manual when you come out that tells you where to go, what to do, how to thrive. So what we're talking about here today is how arming yourself with knowledge and skills can really be the difference maker in being successful when transitioning out of prison. So specifically, how we can empower ex-offenders or returning citizens through education. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in and meet our incredible group of panelists here. Aaron, you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Thank you, Google. Thank you, Jacob. My name is Aaron Kenzo. I'm a professor of criminology and criminal justice at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. My areas of teaching expertise fall in corrections and public policy, and my research focuses predominantly on prisoner education. And the reason I'm very passionate about prisoner education is because it has been the life-saving factor for me, because as a young man, I was incarcerated for about a decade in the carceral state. So I spent the ages of 18 to 28 incarcerated. I took a college class just towards the end of my sentence, and when I came home, I started an associate, bachelor's, master's, and I'm now finishing up my doctorate and also a faculty member at the university. So education can make people thrive in the carceral state, and I was also a very serious and violent offender who was transformed through education in the system. So I encourage all of you to kind of look at ways that we can restore post-secondary education for people in the carceral state.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Michelle Smart. I am founder of Bags to Butterflies. We are a social enterprise located in Detroit. Our mission is to empower formerly incarcerated women with transitional employment, resources, and a caring network on their journey to success. Our journey began in 2015 with a focus group that consisted of 10 women who served between 5 and 30 years in prison. The barriers that they shared that they face was employment and housing. Our organization is tackling the employment barrier. Thank you.
And I am Karlos Harris. I served about 11 and a half years. I returned to Detroit as we would begin to surge with the skilled trades for the second chance or the opportunities for returning citizens here in the city. So I decided that I would move here about 3 years ago from Ann Arbor. And so now we own a school in Southwest Detroit called DSDT, Detroit School for Digital Technology. I own a digital marketing agency. The name of it is Koded Icons. And we work with a number of initiatives around town, whether they be the Michigan Works, DESC, Department of Corrections, and our main keepsake is to try to change individuals that are coming home by training them with technology skills to get them gainfully employed.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Google for this platform, for us sharing some valuable information and experiences that we have endured. I'd like to thank all the attendees for taking time out of their schedule for attending this platform also. My name is Erik Burgess. I am co-creator of the Return Citizen podcast. I did 18 years in prison for a drug, life of law, which when I first was sentenced in 1991, I had mandatory life without no parole. So I'm taking this opportunity. I feel obligated to make an impact on the quality of life for anyone who's been incarcerated, but my main focus and passion is to be proactive and not allowing anyone to become a returned citizen. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you all for those introductions. I think it's important to let people tell you who they are. So that was beautiful. It's great to share this space with you. And yeah, just so to get the questions rolling, I know in my personal experience with returning citizens, like in family, when people get out, they're trying to figure out how to provide basic needs for themselves. And it seems like things like education or employment are sort of out of their grasp. So in your experience, what role does education play for returning citizens upon transitioning back into society?
So employment and education are pivotal to allow people to return to their communities safely and to become productive citizens. So, however, there are a lot of barriers. There's something called collateral consequences of criminal conviction, which basically are legal sanctions throughout the United States. There's 40,000 of them that allow you to legally discriminate against someone like myself or some of these other panelists who have been convicted of various types of felonies. So, checking the box is one thing where you have to disclose felony background for job applications. Myself, coming home 6 years, my first 6 years home, I couldn't find employment because I kept checking that box, hundreds of applications. No one would ever give me an opportunity. My first job was actually a lecturer at Western Michigan University where I was offered a job, which to me is just kind of insane, where it took me 6 years to find employment. It's just really sad. And education has been shown to dramatically reduce recidivism rates. So like nationally, we have recidivism rates now, which are just horrendous. If you look at the Bureau of Justice statistics, after a 9-year period of people like ourselves coming home, 83% of us get rearrested within that 9-year period. So for those of us that have been home 9 years or more, we're among the 17% that have somehow beat those odds. And it's not that a lot of these people are bad people or doing really bad things. They're just trying to survive. And if you don't have education, you don't have skills, it's even harder for you to find employment with those barriers. So what are some things that we can do? Education, when put in the carceral space, dramatically reduces recidivism rates by 43% on average. So if we reinstated Pell Grants to prisoners across the nation, invested in more programs where there was post-secondary programs, particularly vocational skills, then these people who are inside are more prepared when they come home to become productive in their whatever community they end up going to. And that's good for the community because people are not committing more crimes.
So at our organization, we hire women immediately upon returning to the community, and we are taking what we believe is an innovative approach to create jobs. Our organization creates handbags using repurposed wood. And the women that we've hired just recently served 34 years in prison. They're coming back to a community. It's like a whole new world. Our environment is a little different in that the ladies are encouraged to be as creative as they'd like to be. When they come in for the interview, they do have to be interviewed. They are referred. We have 2 women who were referred by MDOC. The other 2 were referred through another organization. They do go through a formal interview, but through the interview process, they also we sit down with them and find out what they want to do from that day forward, we're going to encourage them to let go of the past, live life today, and focus on their dreams. So for us, educating them is, one of the young ladies wanted to go to driver's training. She had been in prison 41 years. We helped her go through driver's training. Another young lady wanted to go to school to learn to sing. That's her passion. We wanted to help her follow her dreams. So we're taking kind of a non-traditional approach to educating the women and also employing them.
And I love the fact that she says a non-traditional approach. So I myself, in serving 11 years, I did it on what we call the installment plan. I'm a C prefix. So that means I went to prison 3 times. All right. And it was mainly because of the lack of education. Not that, I'm an illiterate person or I didn't know. It's just that each time that I got out, I didn't have those mentors around me. I didn't have anyone around me to encourage me to do somewhat better. And it wasn't until I came here to Detroit and the opportunities that are being afforded the returning citizen population that I saw that there was one for me, and that was in technology. About 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to get into digital marketing. And that wasn't something that a returning citizen perhaps could do, And so I decided that, I would teach myself. So thanks to Google and YouTube, I was able to literally sit down and spend a lot of hours to reprogram myself. And I'm so passionate about that now. It's afforded me to be able to go back into the Michigan Department of Corrections and, share those opportunities with guys who are coming home and who haven't the foggiest idea of what the technology landscape here is now. I brought a friend with me today. His name is Mr. Willie Lyles Bay. He served 45 years. 45 years, and he's an example of the type of individuals that we're working with in order to get them the skill sets to be able to meet some of the employment barriers that we're having in our community.
Thank you. I think education is very pivotal, like you said, for individuals who individuals who's going through a transition to coming home. It affords you more opportunities, more marketable skills. Like when I was in prison, only thing we had was college. It wasn't no type of skilled trades where we can learn from. So I say some of the education was based on antiquated theories and some that we couldn't apply to when we come home. So basically, what component that we had to have was the attitude. So we had the attitude to change and pursue other avenues of being successful out here. Like I said, I'm in school now at Wayne State, taking up psychology, and I'll be graduating in the spring. So that's one way I'm trying to make myself more marketable. I'm in the process of becoming a social entrepreneur where I can have an impact on the quality of life.
Great. And so, Aaron, you touched on this just briefly, and I've talked about it with you guys, a number of people on this panel in the past, but educational opportunities in terms of while you're in prison, what types of options exist? You mentioned bringing back Pell Grants, for example. Erik, I know we've talked a lot about your GIS training and the self-education that you were doing with technology magazines. Could you guys speak to, while you are incarcerated, what types of opportunities are available if somebody's proactive, if they want to be taking that power into their own hands, as it currently stands in Michigan, but more broadly speaking?
Michigan, the first, really the most basic education they have, unfortunately, is a GED, a general education diploma, which at least I think 40% of the prison population do not have a GED. Unfortunately, lack of education, as Karlos L reiterated, is one reason why the incarceration rates are going up. I changed my attitude. Like Karlos said, I wasn't illiterate. I wasn't dumb. I changed my attitude because I wanted to prepare myself, and I had a plan for when I come home. So I became a GED tutor, and once the opportunity came up to learn GIS, because I know that's the way the landscape and the format of the world was going to, I wanted to have some type of knowledge where I can be more marketable, have some type of skills to advance myself, and fortunate is to make my family proud. That's what I wanted to do, make my family proud, because they're also going through the incarceration period too also. And some individuals do not understand how it's a very burden on your family as well. And so if you have family in your corner, I think we obligated not only to ourselves, to our family, we're also obligated to our community. And I think we epitome and the apex of what attitude can do as far as, changing your life and it's changing your thoughts. That's all it is.
When does the teacher appear?
When the teacher appear when the student is ready, and I stay ready.
So I think the predominant form of education in all carceral spaces, whether that's Michigan or anywhere in the U.S. or the federal systems, is informal education. And that was extremely powerful for me because when I went into the system, I was a high school dropout, 18-year-old kid. I ended up taking my GED in the county jail when I was awaiting trial. So that was like my first little piece. So a lot of institutions do have GED, which I think is a great step in the right direction to help with those, basic skills with literacy, math, et cetera. But there's very few college programs anymore. So in 1994, the Omnibus Crime Bill passed under the Clinton administration, which destroyed Pell Grant eligibility for prisoners nationwide. And in my personal and professional opinion, this was the most devastating piece of public policy that has ever crossed a congressional space. It destroyed college education nationwide, and fast forward now, we're in 2018. There's very few educational opportunities that are post-secondary in nature. However, in Michigan, we do have a Pell Grant pilot, which was sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education under the Obama administration. And Michigan does have several sites in which prisoners are gaining Pell Grants and actually earning associate's and bachelor's degrees right now, which I think is extremely powerful. And again, there's research to back it up where recidivism rates go down, but also just anecdotally, anyone that I know that's had some type of education in the system is employed. They have a better grasp on their family connections. They're civically engaged citizens. There's so many things that they're improving upon because they become educated and become civically engaged, and that makes them more likely to stay out in society and be productive and tax-paying citizens. There's such a tax base that we're losing by really disenfranchising people that have been locked up in the system, and we're losing economic growth as a nation. And there's so much of this technology stuff, and with Google here, I think that's the future. If we can think about ways to integrate more technology in the prison space, and for people coming home too who may lack the skills. Like when I came home, the new hotness was those Motorola Razr flip phones in 2007. I don't know if any of you remember those, but like this texting was like, holy shit, like, oh my God, like we can like text, and now we all got our smartphones that can do just about anything. And for someone that's been down 10, 20, 30 years, that's just like being like dropped into Shangri-La and you have no idea what to do. So I really, congratulate you, Karlos, for helping people out on that, because that's a much needed piece of re-education those populations.
So part of my process, while I was so I have some college. I'm a college dropout. I was going to school for business computer science. And I can remember one of the last professors I had. He told me I didn't know the difference between there, and there, two, and two. So one of the first things that I accomplished while incarcerated was I began to read as much as I could get my hands on, right? Because I wanted to know. And it was through that reading, everybody in prison says, I'm writing my book, right? So I was able to write 4 novels that when I came home, I self-published. And it was through that trajectory that I landed myself at a point to saying that I can do something other than the crime that was taking me to prison. So many of the guys that I come into contact with now, and I say it like this, I'm really blessed, because after having served the time, I'm able now to go back into the prisons to meet these gentlemen and women. And prison wasn't like that when I came through, right? We didn't have the opportunities, right? So Aaron speaks about the Pell Grant initiative that MDOC had a few years ago. Well, because of the Second Chance Grant, we actually have a contract with MDOC in which we go in and we train. I think it's 119 individuals that's allocated to a program that we have in technology, information technology. And so the research is that we would train them inside, and once they return back here to Wayne County, we actually are getting them placed in employment opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't have access to, and that's through the Labor Department. That wasn't there when I came through the department, and I think that the more we have conversations like this, and we have those innovators like a Mr. Burgess that are futured or forward-thinking in their approach, the more we can begin to help more of our community that are returning home. You know, you have guys that are spent 40 years that literally do not have the skill sets to send a simple email. That's something we take for granted. And I promise you, it's painful to see a person stand at a computer and tell you they can't turn it on. So that's one of the biggest things I and my team are trying to dismantle across the department. We're mainly in Michigan now because that's kind of like a foothold for us. And it's to make sure that those that are returning back to our communities at least have some technology savvy about themselves to where they can simply fill out these online applications and have access to the employment opportunities that we all just take for granted.
Thank you. And it sounds like you all sort of found your own ways to educate yourself and go on a journey after transitioning out. But we know hindsight is 20/20. So what do you wish you knew upon reentry? Anybody?
I wish someone had really told me about your network determines your net worth. You know, my grandmother used to always say, I'm from Arkansas, I'm sorry, all right? So my grandmother used to always say, birds of a feather flock together. And that's so true. Now that I'm older, I'll be 46 next month. And I've learned in my older age now that the people that I really associate with, they kind of have an influence on my future, right? One of the first clients that I got when I opened my digital marketing agency was a judge that sits over at 36th District now. He called me to his office because he heard about this returning citizen that does websites. And so he called me over, and here I am in his chamber, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm literally back in the back room with the judge. You know, if not for technology, if not for me seeing an opportunity for me in the space, I would have never had that opportunity. You know, because the crimes that I committed, I did burglary, and whenever I sat and I did the resumes, and I would always be told that I couldn't get the job because they were crimes of dishonesty. So, you know, technically, I wasn't about to get a job pretty much anywhere. So I had to be creative in my approach. And I just wish someone had sat and told me many, many years ago to really start to position myself with a network of individuals that could actually shift my mindset into a better direction to where I wanted to go. Because I like to think I never was really a bad person. I think we all probably would say that. But at the same time, had I been with more like-minded people, the travel wouldn't have been as long as it has been for me.
The one thing I wish I knew is how to listen. That's one thing, is how to listen. We learn that when we're younger. It's how to listen. You have to know how to listen to learn. And so that's one thing I wish I didn't listen. You know, and signs and symbols around me, especially my grandfather. Why did you do that, boy? You don't have to do that. But that's the only thing that resonated in my mind when I was incarcerated. Why did you got to do that? You ain't have to do that. You wasn't illiterate. You wasn't stupid. You had everything you had. But I made the choice to be foolish and made a very draconian, playful decision that cost me almost my entire life. Like, so when I got incarcerated, I was sentenced to mandatory life without no parole, which meant they wanted me to die in prison. And I told God, I'll never die in prison. I'm not going to die in prison. Just like I walked in, I'm going to walk out. So thank God I'm here to share my story, and I'll never go back, period. I'm never going back. And I want to congratulate all of these individuals up here who have the attitude to come to the forefront and be a prime example of what attitude and what education can do for your life.
So I'll just say really briefly, I piggyback off what Karlos said, networking is key. Again, I put out hundreds of applications. I never got a call back. But when I started making deep connections and relationships. Like my boss now, ironically, is a judge from Washtenaw County. He's the director of criminology and criminal justice where I work now. So isn't that the kind of like ironic relationship, the felon and the judge? But this, I have great and deep respect for this man, and he's been a mentor to me, and I've learned a lot from him, and he sees in me, you know, opportunity and spark of life. If there's one thing I would want to know besides the networking, I would say reentry services should start day one when you get locked up, not like when you come home. You should be getting prepared day one. If you got a 10-year bid on your first day in the system, you should start to build what you need to do for reentry services upon your release. And I know a lot of people rarely ever do that. Secondary to that, understanding trauma. Many people who go into the carceral state are already traumatized, and that trauma is never addressed. A lot of people who are convicted of felonies are survivors of crime. Myself, I was one. My stepfather tried to murder me at the age of 8, and lots of other abuse and violence that I was subjected to, which I'm not saying that to like not be accountable for my crime, but it was certainly a stepping stone that led me into that direction. And if we don't address trauma in the carceral spaces like solitary confinement, being separated from families, all these different things, when people come home, they don't know how to deal with it. And I was not an exception to that rule. When I first came home, 10 years out of the system, that Motorola flip phone was weird. That's a trauma. Technology, I get anxious, I'm nervous, I don't know, I feel like I'm stupid because I don't really know how to work technology and others do, and I just don't know how to like really socially acclimate back into society. No one teaches us those skills. So understanding trauma and having trauma-informed care right when you come into the system so you can start to address that trauma. So when you come home, you're much more safer and less likely to recidivate upon release.
Michelle, do you have any insight you want to share about the women in the program that might? Yeah.
So the women that we service, our organization is fairly new. We just launched our employment initiative in June of this year, where we have hired 4 women. On average, they serve over 40 years in prison. And some of the things that they have expressed, actually, Michelle, I don't think she minds me sharing that Michelle Pearson joined our organization in September after serving 34 years in prison. This is her very first job since coming home. The ladies have shared that being reintegrated in the community is very important to them. They want to give back. They want to be looked at who they are today. They're trying to, again, forget their past. They want to be accepted. They want to work. They want to be recognized as individuals who have already paid their dues. Personally, I've never been to prison. I have a family member, a close friend, whose daughter is currently incarcerated. So that's my passion for helping women upon coming home. But they have shared that, you know, getting out and engaged in the community and getting the support that they need as far as cell phones, technology, education, even simple things as going to the grocery store. You've been away 34 years, 40 years. It's overwhelming. So our organization, and as I said, we are doing things a little different. Our ladies have a health and wellness coach who comes in every Wednesday. They do everything from yoga to they have fitness classes. We have a conference room that we call the gym, so we move things around so to accommodate the ladies. They have a life coach that they meet with twice per month, someone that they can go to. They don't all have family members that they can go to, and if they're struggling, or anyone that they can share their struggles with. We also work with a local bank who has helped them with things like opening up a savings account. So we want them to know about budgeting. So they're coming back to a whole new world, and they definitely need the support.
And just to hammer the point home, because this is something that we touch in on almost every episode, is the power of networking. We really can't stress enough. This is something that almost every guest on the podcast touches on in some capacity. Folks that are successful are folks that build a network. People hire people that they know, that they're comfortable with, and one way to do that is by meeting people and forming that personal relationship. So I appreciate that, and thank you guys for all that insight. I also just want to point out, before I forget to mention, that each of these wonderful panelists has been featured individually on the podcast previously in different capacities, on separate episodes, deep diving into their individual areas of expertise. So if you're interested in their in learning more about these different stories,
ReturningsCitizen.org.
What's that?
ReturningsCitizen.org.
Yeah,
That's
the
what
ReturningsCitizen.org. Absolutely. Great. Well, moving right along. So I'd love to hear from you guys. We're here at the Google Detroit headquarters. What specific opportunities do you see through technology specifically? I know a few of you have touched on this a little bit. I do want to point out that this podcast wouldn't exist if Erik hadn't been reading technology magazines in prison and had heard about podcasting and this idea that a radio show could touch people all over the world. That was how this entire thing came about. Erik was like, I heard about this really cool thing called a podcast. It's like literally that was how that started. So I'm curious to know what this is an example of how technology can empower folks. What opportunities do you see through technology? And then on the flip side, what types of challenges do you see through technology?
So I think there's a lot of opportunity for technology. Something that has been done as a pilot in the Michigan Department of Corrections and other correctional systems nationwide is they're starting to integrate tablets into those carceral spaces, which I think is extremely powerful. And some people have some kickback on that, saying that they're kind of pimping the prisoners, but I really have a pushback on that as far as, because they're making money off these tablets, which, Google's a corporation too. No, I'm not hating on Google. You guys got to make money. It is what it is. There's a bottom dollar. You got to do things. But what I think is extremely important is getting that technology in those prison spaces where people are able to start getting those technological skill sets. And something I'm working on now is I'm trying to develop a pilot with the University of Michigan Dearborn in which we can create hybrid courses that will be offered, and we're looking for foundations to fund this, where some of the courses could be held online in a tablet, so they could be getting academic credit doing a course on a tablet in their cell, but also having face-to-face classes, kind of like we have here out on the streets, because there's a lot of hybrid functionality. I don't think we should have a fully online or fully in person, but I think a blend of the two, integrating technology, is great. I'm sorry, the other part. Challenges, getting those tablets into the prison system. The Department of Corrections is kind of strange at times. It's a very strange bird. So when they feel that it is to their advantage, they're more open to it. And I think what places like Google and other foundations that are connected to these corporate entities can do is try to develop relationships with Department of Corrections. Maybe the Michigan Department of Corrections as a start, other Department of Corrections at the federal level, state, and find ways to really give them opportunities to allow prisoners to have programming with these technological products.
So in April, I did a commencement speech at Lapeer Correctional Institution for about 53 individuals who had gained their GED. And while there, I was approached and asked if there was a way that we could actually offer training at this individual prison. The prison is the only one in the state that houses youthful offenders. And so I actually proposed to MDOC that we would be able to come in and train them in digital marketing. Why? Because it saved my life, right? And so speaking directly about the technology, the platform that they use is called Lantern, and it's with JPay. The JPay system is the one that's used statewide in order that they would receive, whether it be funding or, media, videos, trainings. And the unique thing about the JPay system is that if you are an educational institution, you can set the platform up at no cost to the inmates themselves. And so that's something that we've been working on at the school, and I would love to partner with you guys in order to make that accessible. Because one of the first things that we were given the problem of was how do we get more of the guys the trainings that we have developed. And it seemed like the easiest way was through JPay, and the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. It's just a matter of putting the content together, getting it on the system. And it's amazing that I've already developed these relationships that I'm able to make that happen. So what are the unique challenges that I see as far as the technology? The individuals that are coming home, the ones that I sit in and I try to work with on a daily basis, they just have no idea whatsoever of how far this technology can take them. literally. I have guys that come home and think that it's okay to just post anything on Facebook until they go out to an interview and they don't get the job because of what they posted, right? I have individuals that have been returned back to prison because of postings that they made. So they haven't really got a fine sense of the technology and the day and age that we live in. So I think that that's one of the haphazards to the technology piece for those that are coming home.
Piggyback on what Karlos said, technology is what I think going to keep most individuals out of prison. Unfortunately, fortunately, this is the way of the world, and we must be prepared and equipped to be a part of the world if we want to be productive. Network and technology got me to this point. When I approached Jacob, somebody told me about the podcast. I was like, how can I implement this in my life to make an impact all around the world? Not only just in Wayne County or Detroit. I wanted to make an impact, share my story around the world. So I approached Jacob. I was like, man, have you heard of the podcast? I met Jacob at an event. I said, Jacob, you heard of just talking? I'm always talking and asking questions, so it didn't make a difference. He could have been 4 feet tall. It didn't make a difference. I was going to him. So I was like, Jacob, have you heard of the podcast? I introduced myself. Everybody did such and such this amount of time. He was like, I want to hear your story. I said, have you heard of the podcast? He said, yeah. So I told him I had an idea, and we collaborated, and this is where we are right now. And I think the biggest challenge, the biggest obstacle or improvement is self. That's what it's based on. It's based on self. So the advancement is based on yourself if you want to advance, or your biggest challenges is self. We got to want to change. That's why I want to become proactive. We got to want to change. So self is the biggest challenge, or self is the improvement.
I'm going to have to agree with Erik. It is self, and I have to be honest because I'm kind of technology challenged myself in certain areas. We have the ladies coming home. They're getting these cell phones. They have no idea how to use them. I pick mine up. As long as I can say hello and send a text, I'm good. All the apps and all of that stuff I don't personally use. So we've been trying to get someone out to train the ladies on using the cell phones. I mean, you don't have to speak with someone with your cell phone on speaker, that type of thing. And it's been challenging. They have a certain carrier that they use, and just trying to get someone from that particular carrier to come out or to help the ladies with that, it's been quite difficult. So, yeah, I'm kind of guilty as myself. I don't know a lot about the technology, but I'm learning and willing to learn.
But you did launch an e-commerce business, which is pretty cool. So, that's it. She doesn't know about technology and still launched an e-commerce business. Testament to how far technology's come. So now what we're going to do is we're actually, so as many of the folks tuning in and the folks in this room know, Google is a leader in the training and education space around the world. I mean, all types of incredible programs come out of Google. So I'm going to invite Elise Guilfoyle to come rejoin us up here and tell us a bit more in detail about the types of efforts, relevant efforts that Google is working on. And then we're going to kick off. We took some Q&A in advance, so we're going to kick off the Q&A and turn it back to the panel.
Thank you so much. And thanks, everybody, for your perspective and sharing your experiences. This has been really incredible. I think so. Some of the things that Google has done, I think, on a national level, and Aaron, you mentioned this earlier, there's the Ban the Box initiative. And in 2016, Google, along with a lot of other tech companies, pledged to end having a box that says, have I ever been convicted of a felony, very early on in the process. That removes a lot of people from being considered, and it doesn't give context for what they've been through and their experience and all of their maybe even qualifications. So I think our question to you is, in addition to that, and we have a lot of other kind of smaller local initiatives too that are trying to make a difference for people who have been formerly incarcerated. But what role do you see companies like Google and other businesses playing in ex-offenders' reentry into society, and especially the workforce?
I got that. First of all, I think Google can develop a platform where it can proactive process, where it can include diversity and inclusion. Myself, working on a social entrepreneur business as far as it's called Digi 650, and the reason I call it Digi 650 because the way we communicate in the world is digital. And 650, I was convicted. It's my past. I was convicted of the 650 drug life of law, and so that's why I called it Digit 650. Where I can make my past make an imprint on the future, and where my goal is to go into the juvenile court system, right, and try to eliminate FTAs, which FTAs stand for failure to appear, due to the lack of prior transportation or any type of external or internal factors the parents may have. 75% of Wayne County families have smartphones, and 60% of some of families do not have transportation. So any low-income defendants who may have trouble or somehow impeding transportation or any other inconvenience to get to court, my goal is to have a virtual hearing court session for nonviolent offenders or whatever through mobile. It can be mobile, iPad, or computer. So I think I'm not looking for Google shouldn't have to put any money into this system if they just have the willingness to be involved. That's what companies like that just be the willingness to be involved. It's not all about financial gain. So it's about the willingness to be involved, having compassion, and having a purpose. So that's why I feel Google and any other organization that can help be proactive. I'm looking for a reactionary aspect because we have a lot of reactionary organizations out here. But like I say, my goal is really to change this title of the Return Citizen podcast and change it to not to become a return citizen. So.
So if I had a wish list, right, I have this thing where I say we have to hold their feet to the fire. Although there's a lot of propaganda about returning citizens and having second chances, in truth, that's all that it is at times. It's propaganda. You know, last year we graduated about 185 individuals through our programs, right? And a huge portion of them were returning citizens. And at the end of the day, it's still difficult for us to find employment opportunities for them. I don't care if the ban the box initiatives is in past, whatever the situation is a fact that their backgrounds still follow them. So if companies like a Google, who have come into perhaps one of the cities within the state where the most returning citizens are coming back to, would actually take up the initiative to offer some sort of entry-level positions to some of these offenders, that would be huge within our community, right? As well as if there were some sort of incentives behind your entrepreneur endeavors, right? A lot of us are entrepreneur-minded. And if we had an opportunity to actually find some sort of funding for the ideas that we had, that would be huge for us as well. So I think that those pairings would offer a great opportunity for those within the community to accelerate their return and be more successful.
So I'd take it even to a higher level. I mean, there's a lot of formerly incarcerated people that could go well beyond entry-level positions. So I really encourage you to look at people who could be, you know, at the administrative level, perhaps on a foundation board, or maybe even create a panel of formerly incarcerated people. If you want to work on reforming the system and give back through corporate donations, you need a panel of people that have been justice involved, and also survivors of crime. People always leave them out of the equation. You need survivors of crime, who are people on the streets that have been subjected to criminal activity, and also people that have been in the carceral state. And then mix it up with random other community members to kind of like really find a way. What are the programs that are worth funding? What do you want to throw your dollars at? And find some really bright individuals who have gained academic credentials, professional credentials, technological credentials that can really help expand Google in completely different ways. And I really challenge Google, like, think about ways how you can really invest technology into prisons and jails, and also youth facilities. That's another thing we rarely talk about. These juvenile detention facilities nationwide, where youth are often forgotten. If anybody deserves a second chance, it's someone under the age of 18. Kids should definitely never be just the snapshot of one thing that they've done in their life.
Wow. Through our organization, our program is a 9-month transitional employment initiative. We're actually testing this concept out. When the ladies transition out, it is our thought that they would either transition out. Michelle's shaking her head no. She's already told me she's going to be protesting outside when her 9 months is up. But we don't know what we don't know. So we don't know if 9 months is actually enough time for the ladies when they come home. But we do know that when at some point they are going to transition out of our program, and we are looking for partners, someone to partner with us. The ladies will have trained, they'll have the job skills, they'll have the life skills, and at some point they will transition out. We love to partner with organizations so that they know that when they leave our organization, they have some place to go as far as being employed. Or entrepreneurship. We're working with Build Institute, who will be taking some of our ladies who have entrepreneurship desires. They want to start their own businesses. So collaborations like that for us would definitely be very important.
Awesome, thank you. We have one, I guess we can maybe do 2 more questions. So last year we hosted a Talks at Google event that featured Recovery Park Farms, which is based here in Detroit. And I think our question was around, have you seen other organizations that have had similar success in building a bridge for returning citizens from incarceration to the workforce?
And I'm going to hand this one over to the panel, but I just want to point out that Anna Cohn from Recovery Park Farms was featured on, I believe, episode 2 of the Returning Citizen podcast. They are an incredible organization, so I'm so excited to hear that. And we also, a major function of the podcast is to be highlighting in detail other entities that are deep diving and doing this type of work. But I'd love to not go into too much detail and let the panel answer that one.
I guess I'll bring it back, not necessarily specifically to the city of Detroit, but just statewide, where this post-secondary access to education, I think, is profound. I think if any issue is pivotal to helping people inside, finding private donation monies to help fund prison education, I think it's an investment that will have an incredible ROI, return on investment, where you're going to have people coming out like myself and the other gentleman on this panel who spent some significant amount of time in the system, where education, I think, for all of us has been like a really key in turning our life around and becoming productive, and not just for ourselves and our families, but for those around us. I mentor youth that come out of the system. I mentor men who are older than me, women who are older than me, that did 20, 30 years and help them get on that technological kick or access to education. So if anything, I would just say, look at programs for bringing education back in the system.
Any specific examples of organizations?
I know the Vera Institute of Justice, which is a huge powerhouse think tank of criminal justice. They threw a lot of private dollars towards prison education, and they were one of the ones that helped push that Pell Grant pilot that we currently have here in the state of Michigan and others across the U.S.
So our organization is actually what we believe is the first organization to empower formerly incarcerated women with employment immediately upon their return to the community. And just in speaking with the ladies, just knowing that they're coming home and that they have a job, they want to be able to be self-sufficient. We are doing a lot of collaborative things in the community with organizations. There's another organization, Rebel Nail, that does the graffiti jewelry with women with barriers to employment. But as far as when they come home and they know when they leave those prison gates that they can come to our organization, get an interview, and be hired, it's crucial.
So, DSDT, we're kind of different. And so a lot of the men and women that we train, because of the lack of being able to bridge them with employment, we've been creative in hiring them. So at one time, I think we were up near 30 individuals that we had employed with us around March. And so that comes through a lot of funding, whether it be through the Department of Labor and some citywide initiatives as well. So I think for us, when we're showing up at these job fairs, and at times we're truly the only one employer of the returning citizens, that says something to me. I'd never heard of Bags to Butterflies until literally I saw the flyer, right? And I don't know if it's necessarily that we work in silos. It's just that the information isn't out there. The only other organization that I'm akin to is Luck Inc. and Luck Inc. does a lot of work with returning citizens who've been away for quite some time. And so I think that if we are allowed somehow to come together and work more as a team to kind of tackle what's facing our community, it'll be more successful for all of us in the long run.
And quick shout out to Karlos and DSDT. We had a gentleman come to us this past year who had spent a long stint in prison, middle-aged guy, probably around 60 years old. He was a former school superintendent or administrator of some sort. So to Aaron's point, not always entry-level talent. He had committed a crime later in life, very smart, very well-educated guy. And Karlos gave him an opportunity to, I don't know exactly what he's doing, but some sort of administrative work at DSDT as a form of transitional employment. So huge shout out. Any other organizations that are jumping out to you, Eric, offhand, that you want to mention quickly?
Luck Inc. and another one ran by Keith Bennett called Flip the Script. And also, our family is an organization. So all you do is have to ask. Our family and friends, huge organization. So that's where it starts.
Thank you. Our last question is a little off topic, but it's very timely. It's as we approach the midterm elections. The question is, what are your thoughts on states like Florida putting the removal of felony disenfranchisement on the ballot, and how can we support initiatives like this to enable ex-felons beyond education, even if we don't live in those states?
Please let me tackle this one. Please. All right, so we're part of a accreditation process organization called Council on Occupational Education. And so we are slated to be in Florida the 5th through the 9th of November. And I am watching this election so heavily right now because I'm really at odds with going to a state where my community doesn't even have the right to vote. So for me, my trip is literally in the hangar as it's decided whether or not the right to vote by ex-felons will be granted once again. I think that the process that they've been implementing over the years is archaic. I cherish my right to vote. Now think about this. I'm the guy whose driver's license was suspended for 18 years. And I had more suspended license tickets, and I've been in jails and prisons, but yet, at every opportunity I had to vote, I was there. And my children, they're 18 and 20 now, they vote because their father was there taking them. So I don't take lightly the fact of people being disenfranchised within my community because they're not afforded the right to vote. I think that it's a right that we're all entitled to, regardless of our backgrounds, and we should be afforded the opportunity to exercise it.
Anyone else want to weigh in there? And I just want to point out, so in Michigan, formerly incarcerated individuals can vote. Can you vote while you're in prison? Will you explain the climate in Michigan currently?
So as a pretrial detainee in a county jail, you're allowed to vote if you're not convicted. Once you are sentenced in the county jail or you go off to prison, you cannot vote in Michigan. There are 2 states, one was Maine and I believe the other is Vermont, where you can actually vote absentee ballot in a prison setting. But there's a huge voting, so we've got 2.3 million people inside right now. That's a huge voting block. And now if you take that and you look at nationally, there's different stats that say this, but roughly 70 million Americans have some type of criminal justice history, whether that's an arrest, a conviction, a juvie bit, whatever. They have something. So think about that as a voting block. So to piggyback off what Karlos said, I'm actually working on something with the Soros Justice Fellowship project where I'm trying to create this carceral state public policy training academy, which would empower formerly incarcerated people, survivors of crime, not only to register to vote and vote, but educate them, because a lot of people who go out and vote are uneducated voters, unfortunately. That's just the reality. So create a platform that is criminal justice minded. What are the important issues, like, for instance, mandatory minimum, solitary confinement, abolishing the death penalty, et cetera, et cetera. Create a voting block that is focused on these issues. Secondary to that, we need to have people mobilize in their communities and have formerly incarcerated people and survivors of crime run for elected offices. Seems real simple, but a lot of people are scared to do it. Local, state, and federal level, if you add those 70 million people in this country and their family and friends, that's half of this country now. Think about the changes that we could have if we got all those people, or even just 10 or 20% of them, that could really dramatically change, not just this midterm election, but come 2020, I know a certain person, I want to vote the hell out of office very, very much. And there's a lot of other congressional reps too, and state level and local level, because they are not representative of a lot of our interests. I find that now we have corporate policy, and no offense to Google right here, but like, I feel that we need to find more ways that are more beneficial to citizens as opposed to corporations. So that's my platform on that.
And just to clarify, for anyone who is formerly incarcerated or the families of folks that are formerly incarcerated, you can vote in Michigan if you're formerly incarcerated. So just to be super clear on that topic, I think a lot of folks are intimidated or confused and don't realize that they are able to vote. So
I think it doesn't matter as well. I think their vote doesn't matter.
I think their vote doesn't matter. So yeah, please, everybody vote.
Great. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Round of applause for our panel. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We're really glad that you came here today to share with us.